All the time, my clients reach out to me and say, James, this guy wants to pay me, but he asks me to give him a W-9 before he can pay me. And I'm a foreign person and I have an LLC and I can't give them a W-9. And I tell them, that's correct, you should be giving them a W-8BEN. So I'm gonna go through in this video, I made a little chart for you, an example of Steve Sandwich LLC paying digital marketing companies who are helping him with his business. 3 different examples: a corporation, an LLC, and a multi-member LLC. And we're going to go through what forms should be delivered from the LLCs to Mr. Steve and what Steve should be doing for payments of these services and how it all works with some IRS references, some citations, some sources. And I'm going to keep it tight so you can share with those U.S. companies who are paying you so they can have a little bit more insights on why they don't need to give you a 1099 and also why they shouldn't be withholding taxes on that payment to you as a foreign person. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right into it. So in this example, we have Pablo. First name, last name, it's the same. Pablo's a funny guy. So Pablo, actually didn't note this on here. He's going to be, Pablo's from Argentina. Argentina. He's from Argentina, lives, works in Argentina, not American. He's a marketing whiz, the best, and he helps Steve sell so many sandwiches. And here's 3 different examples. He has Landfall Corp, whatever. He has Magic P LLC, which I think has a really nice ring to it. And then this one's going to be PS 3PS LLC. And that's going to be Pablo and Sergio. And that's his Brazilian partner who's a citizen of Brazil. So in the first example, Landfall Corp, this is a corporation. So if a U.S. corp over here, a U.S. person, pays another U.S. person more than $600, they need to issue them a 1099. So this would be on here, Form 1099. And that's going to be for the payment to this U.S. corp, right? And then in this example, over here, this is a multi-member LLC. And I'm going to show you the forms, the W-9, the W-8BEN, and the 1099. We're going to go through those forms really quickly. I also have much more detailed forms and much more detailed videos on how to fill out the W-8BEN, the W-9, the W-8BEN-E. And I'm going to go through them briefly in this video, but I have also more detailed videos on that as well if you want to see that just for you. And in this one, there's nothing. And I'll show you why. So, I mean, I'm kind of jumping to the end of the answer here, but when there's a multi-member LLC, 2 guys, even if they're both foreign, you would still issue a W-9, and I'll explain that on the W-9 form. And Steve Sandwich, he's paying this company, it's a 1099, he's paying this company, Magic P LLC, as long as he delivers a W-8BEN, Steve Sandwich should keep that W-8BEN on file and should not issue a 1099 because he can't, because there's no U.S. tax number, and also should not withhold taxes because it's not performed in the U.S. I'm going to skip through to the instructions for Form W-8BEN first. So who must provide Form W-8BEN? You must give a Form W-8BEN to the withholding agent or payer if you're a non-resident alien who is a beneficial owner of an amount subject to withholding, or if you're documenting, or if you're account holder of a foreign financial institution, or just whatever, documenting yourself as a non-resident alien. So I have a lot of people I don't employ. I have a lot of contractors on my team who are non-residents, and they all have a W-8BEN on file. So when the IRS asks me, James, why didn't you file 1099s for all these people you paid? I say I have a W-8BEN on file. So the W-8BEN, as you can see on here, let's zoom in a little bit. This is a certificate of foreign status of beneficial owner. So these are most often required when there's a payment subject to withholding, but a payment of services is not subject to withholding. And on this form, to fill it out, you need to put your name, your country of citizenship, your address, and that generally in that country is great. A mailing address if you have one in the U.S. If you have a tax number on here, you can put it on, but if you don't have it, you can check the instructions. Let's see, line 5, if required. If you have an SSN, enter it here. If you do not have SSN and you're not eligible to get one, you can get an I-10 if you need one. You generally only need these if you are going to have taxes withheld. You must provide a SSN or TIN if you're claiming exemption from withholding for certain annuities or submitting the form to a partnership that has a business in the U.S. because they need to withhold taxes. Ideally, if you're going to have taxes withheld on a payment, you want it attributed to some tax ID so that you can apply for a refund. So let's go back to what we were talking about. In general, and I've shared this on a number of other videos, for non-resident aliens, if I'm paying Pablo for his work through his LLC, and he's a non-resident, his work is subject to it's sourced based on where he's performing the service, and that's going to be in Argentina, right? So it's not U.S. source. Now, when we're talking about FDAP income, they say, and this is where there can be some confusion. When something's FDAP income, tax at a 30% or lower rate applies on gains from U.S. sources, but only if they're not effectively connected. So it's not effectively connected, but from U.S. sources. So we can see on here, sourcing is based on where it's performed. So compensation for personal services, which is what I'm paying Pablo for his marketing, I would only withhold taxes if he's doing those services in the U.S. So if you fly Pablo in to film a marketing campaign, you should withhold taxes on the amount. I mean, there's some exceptions or whatever, but you should withhold taxes on that, and that's when a W-8 is most important. Now, here's another article from the IRS, Pay for Personal Services Performed. This section explains the rules for withholding tax on pay for personal services. You must withhold at 30% on the compensation you pay to a non-resident alien for labor personal services performed in the United States, unless there's an exemption or an exclusion or whatever. So there are exemption exclusions, but in general, it's right here, for performed in the United States. So that's referencing here. On this line, it says, based on the source, it says the source is where they're performed. Everyone's doing everything remotely, so there's no withholding taxes. So you can give them their pay without a W-9 because a W-9 is incorrect. If you ask them to complete this W-9 form, where is my W-9 form? This is incorrect. On this form, you can see at the bottom, they have to certify that they're a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person. That's not correct. So for an LLC who has to do this, a multi-member LLC, in this example, PS LLC on W-9 would do it like this. They'd be an LLC with a P on here. Bang. And that's PS LLC. And you can sign this because this partnership isn't subject to withholding, but potentially your partnership filing would be withholding taxes. So I'm trying to make this as clear as possible. A corporation pays tax in the U.S. If you open a corp or an Inc. in any state, it's subject to U.S. taxation at a flat rate of 21% as of the time of filming this video. And if Steve pays them more than $600, he has to issue a W-9. Same with PS LLC. It doesn't pay taxes in the U.S., and these guys can own it and run it without paying taxes, subject to different certifications. I'm not going to go through it in this video. But if Steve Sandwich, a U.S. corp, pays PS, and he gets a W-9 from them, he would issue them also a Form 1099 showing how much he paid them. Let's look at a Form 1099 miss. You put the payer's name, the recipient's name, the recipient's tax ID, so you need to have an EIN and this is only issued to people who get a W-9, and they're going to put rents, royalties, or other income. They have a 1099 NEC, non-employment compensation, generally issued to individuals instead of corporations, but again, I'm here to try and talk to you about this. So if Pablo has the Biscuit SA, which is a Panama Corp, and that owns the Kind LLC, and then Steve Sandwich is paying the Kind LLC, he would ask for the tax identification form, which is, they're all the same thing, a W-8, a W-8BEN, a W-8BENE, a W-9. They're all to identify your U.S. tax status for someone who's paying you generally from the U.S. And that person needs to determine if they need to issue a 1099 or potentially withhold taxes. If you're paying someone for services abroad, as I explained here, it's based on the sourcing. If they're not doing the work from the U.S., you don't have to withhold taxes unless you are potentially paying dividends or interest or pension or alimony or rent or royalties. But for services that they're performing, you don't need to withhold taxes. So I hope that clears it up for you. I think I crushed this in under 10 minutes. Send this to your employer if they're trying to withhold taxes. And if you're a foreign person, a non-resident who needs help setting up the LLCs and the bank accounts, of course we do that. And if you are a U.S. entity and you pay a lot of non-residents and you still have questions, you can schedule a call with me, jamesbakercpa.com/schedule. Very happy to work with you guys. Hopefully this help clears it up for you a little bit about who needs to file a 1099, who needs to get taxes withheld, who needs a W-9, who needs a W-8, and how it all works. Hopefully that's helpful. And if it's not, comment below and I'll try and answer as many of the questions as I can. Have a great day. Thank you.